right behind you.
Hello. Thank you for listening to another episode of
He's right behind. Let me start over. Do it again. Do it again. I wasn't ready.
I liked it.
Okay.
Hello, and thank you for listening to another episode of
He's right behind you.
Thank you. That's Jessica, and I'm Avital, and today we are joined by Sara Benincasa, author and comedian. She's written 2 books, one called Agoraphobia and the other Real Artists Have Day Jobs, which is a great title. 5 books!
Yes, I've published 5 books. I've actually written 6.5 books, but 5 of them have been published.
Whoa, do you want to tell us the names of the other 3?
Yes, there's Great, which is a YA novel that is inspired by The Great Gatsby, but with 2 teenage girls in love, or is it in lust? One Wild Summer in the Hamptons. Then there is DC Trip, which is a novel about 2 teachers in their 20s who take some wacky teens from New Jersey on a Washington, D.C. trip. And I can thank that for a couple years of Writers Guild health insurance, because I adapted that as a feature that didn't get made. And then I also adapted Agoraphobia as a pilot that didn't get made. Amazing. But again, another couple years of WGA health insurance.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And then I did a silly joke book called Tim Kaine is Your Nice Dad, which was very much of the time in 2016.
This is amazing. We are so excited to have you. Tell us what movie you chose.
The Shining.
Do you want to tell us why you've chosen this movie?
I chose The Shining because I love it, and because it was the first horror film of critical note that I got into as a kid. I'm not a completist. I wouldn't even necessarily call myself, I'm not a horror film junkie for sure. I'm a very casual fan of the horror genre. But this was the first horror film that I ever saw, and I must have seen it when I was like 10 or something, and I've seen it many, many times since. That was lauded, that was critically acclaimed, that was lauded for its beauty and its storytelling and all these different things. I mean, other than that, I love Sleepaway Camp 2. Shout out to Pam Springsteen, you're the best. But, you know, this is one of my 2 favorite horror films. The other one being Sleepaway Camp 2.
Perfect. Great.
Not 1 and not 3, although 3 is enjoyable.
And do you remember, like, when you were growing up, like, what movies really scared you, or a certain, like,
Jurassic
image?
Park. Jurassic
really?
Park scared me more than The Shining ever did.
Wow.
Because I saw, at the time, the special effects felt so realistic to me as a child that I truly came home and believed that there might be... I knew logically that there were no dinosaurs hiding in my backyard, but I kind of thought maybe there could be.
Jessica, would you categorize Jurassic Park as a horror movie?
Yes.
Interesting.
Really?
Yeah,
I like that you're surprised, and you said it scared you the most.
I would say it's on the same level as Jaws. It's a creature feature.
This is a really fun debate, I think, how often people disagree on what constitutes horror.
I'm just surprised because I just hadn't thought about it. But yeah, I would say that does make sense.
There are moments where the raptors jump out at you.
Yeah.
People are hiding from danger.
I'm always here for a shot of a trembling glass of water indicating an earthquake, an attack.
Yes.
Really anything.
A tremble is good.
Are there any, like, specific fears that you have in life that, like, when you watch The Shining, you know, that really hit you?
I will always fear the death of Scatman Crothers. I believe him to be eternal. I guess marrying the wrong guy.
That is a great fear.
That is, and very much depicted in The Shining.
Yeah, and I'm, like, single, so I haven't made that choice. But I came close probably a couple times. And being in a toxic, shitty relationship where you are deeply anxious and not dealing with your shit, and they are deeply unhinged, not dealing with their shit, is very much what it feels like. That's what The Shining feels like.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
you can watch it as an allegory for a lot of different things, and one of those things is being in a mutually negative relationship.
Have you ever been in such a relationship?
Oh, yeah.
You said that so happily.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
well,
not
because you're not in it now.
Yeah, that's
true. No, I'm not in it now, but I've been in relationships, where they weren't chasing me with a baseball bat or hallucinating ghosts.
It was an emotional baseball bat.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's an emotional baseball bat. And where I was strung out and a raw nerve, and that certainly, and thank God there were no children involved.
This movie always, like, hits me right away because I'm so scared of, like, isolation. So the idea, like, last night Brad and I were watching Island Hunters, which is a show instead of House Hunters where people are hunting for an island to buy.
Oh, you have to, yeah.
And Brad was like, would you ever want to buy an island and live on it? And I was like, No, that is The Shining. Like, I don't want to be somewhere where I can't order food, I can't go to the grocery store, I can't go to the hospital if I get hurt. Like, what is the point of that? And that's every time I watch this movie, it starts out so nice because the hotel's bustling, and then as soon as it's just them, I'm like, you gotta go. You gotta get out. Like, I start to feel cabin fever in my apartment watching this.
Amazing.
Would you live on Hilton Head, though? Like a very populated, overdeveloped island? Hilton Head, Catalina.
If there are people,
She doesn't want her own island. She doesn't want to be alone on an
I
island.
want
even
people.
with
I
Brad.
want somebody to cook me dinner that I can order. I want a grocery store. I want a movie theater. I have basic needs
The
that need to be
first time
met.
you see Wendy wheeling that room service cart, I thought that the cook was still staying there and making them food, and I was like, "This is a dream," but it's not. That's not what was happening.
No, and can you imagine you're the cook and the waiter for your husband?
Oh,
He's not
awful.
coming down there to see you.
That's
Oh.
every woman's life.
It's so
Until
isolating.
they invented feminism in a flawed laboratory.
Well, let's get right into
Or
it.
Postmates.
First of all,
Mm.
the first thing I would like to point out is that the Overlook Hotel, Overlook is an auto antonym, so it means its opposite.
Nice.
Essentially, it's both when you fail to notice something, like you can overlook an important fact, or to view something from above. And I think that is very interesting, and I would like, as we go along, to explore the varied meanings of that.
I've never thought about that before.
I fucking love the opening of this movie.
Oh my God,
It's like
beautiful.
I hate long
Jinx.
openings. I hate things that it takes a while until the movie gets started. It drives me crazy
Me
in
too,
life.
but I love
But
it here.
I never fast forward this one. I love the music and how
Ugh.
creepy it is, and I love the long drive, so you know, like, he's near nothing.
Yes,
It's so smooth too, and today that would be a drone shot. I
yeah.
was thinking about that when I was
Yeah.
And this is
watching
what, a
it.
helicopter shot?
Must be. Yes.
Must be,
So
but
good.
so
Not a crane.
smooth, so beautiful.
Mhm.
It's so good. And then when it cuts back to Shelley Duvall in the apartment and she's smoking while her son is eating like a white bread sandwich, I die. I love it so much. It's just like a different era to me.
Yeah.
Her hair is very troubling in this film.
I love
And
it. I love everything about her in this movie.
It's just so flat and thin, and I'm concerned about the volume, but I believe that her hair is an extension of her character.
I
Yeah,
agree.
'cause
She doesn't
she
care about herself.
she doesn't have a voice. She
Yes.
doesn't have the volume.
She's an abused woman. She's an emotionally
She
abused
doesn't
woman.
have the volume. That's a beautiful metaphor.
Mhm.
And I looked, as soon as it started, I was like, how old is she in this? Because I'm
And?
so obsessed with her. She, according to IMDb, in case the
Mhm.
birthdays are wrong, she would be 31 in
Wow.
1980, and Jack Nicholson would have been 43 in 1980. When I was doing research on this, that Stephen King, he's got a lot of problems with this movie. And like one of the articles I read, it was like, I have a problem with this, this, and this. And he like wants to put more blame on her performance, like for
Mhm. I
one of
saw
the
that
things he
too.
really doesn't like. And I honestly don't get that. I don't get anybody that doesn't like her in this movie because her performance, every time I see it, it moves me.
I agree. I think she's amazing, but I do understand why if you've written it and you have a different idea in your head, it's easy to be attached to the version that you saw.
Yeah, I
And
think it's very hard as an author, I think, to get, that's one of the things you have to do, right? And I'm a nobody author. So Stephen King is a big deal author with probably a much bigger ego, and I would assume, and I love his work. I love On Writing, particularly, which is a wonderful book that I recommend to anytime I teach writing. It's really great, but it's On Writing, a memoir of the craft, which is great. But I think that he probably in subsequent years became much more accustomed to wielding more creative control. And I do think that it's a discussion I've had when I've adapted is a lot of authors, for example, are not welcomed into a writer's room. So
Yeah.
a lot of times when you see a show that's adapted from a book, the writer's not involved, and there's good reason for that. Although I want to very much be involved in my adaptations, which is that authors have egos, and authors are so attached to what was done. So I have to believe that he was so attached to what he was doing and writing about addiction and dealing with his shit that he can't get outside of it.
Well, and then he remade this.
Yes,
my
as
friend
a
Steven
series.
Weber is in it.
I know Stephen Weber.
I love Steven Weber. He is a
Yeah.
delightful human. I've
I've
never
noticed
seen
you
it.
guys in pictures together, and I'm like, what a small world, because we were in a pilot together. I love him.
Oh, he's such
great.
a rad dude.
Yeah.
Steven Weber coming
so
to
funny and
Indebted
talented.
on some what network is that going to be on? The one with him and Fran Drescher.
I have no
It's
idea.
a new series.
Also funny that you say he's in a pilot because he was a pilot in Wings.
Oh yeah, that's true.
He is Very funny.
can sing,
Very
can dance.
talented.
Yeah,
Has some in Mamma Mia.
A ridiculous, filthy sense of humor. Like
Yeah.
a great
Big
human.
fan. Okay, we'll have to talk about him
Okay, so when this
separately.
movie starts out, he goes to the interview, and they're basically saying, like, you know, do you want to be the caretaker for this inn? It's going to be 5 months. The winters are going to be rough. All you kind of have to do is repair as you go. It's not a lot of work, but you have to live here for 5 months. And it might get to you. Funny story, it got to the last guy.
He kind of laughs as he says it.
Yeah, he murdered his children and family and chopped
No
them
big
into...
deal.
Yeah, Stuart Ullman is like cackling away behind his desk, and it's so weird because you're like, that's a horrible thing to say, and his delivery of the line is so weird.
I love
But
it.
do you think if you were on this interview and they said, forget about ghosts, forget about the guy who just chopped his children up, do you think you could spend 5 months at the Overlook and like write the great American novel or whatever Jack is trying to do?
Yes. I
No.
love it. It appeals to me.
I don't think I
Yeah.
could.
I'm
because-
100% no. I couldn't stay there a week.
I mean, I'm not down for this. I'm agoraphobic, which is it's been very well under control for many a year, but it's a fear of travel, so I have a tendency to isolate anyway. So one of the tasks for me in my life as a human is to make myself go out, make myself make human connections, make myself get into a routine, seeing people, putting myself in nature, which I certainly could do for some of the time at the Overlook. I would spend some time hiking around, but the lack of companionship would be quite unhealthy.
Early on, he says, my wife is a fan of ghost stories and
Yes,
horror.
we've all picked up on that right before the
And I'm
emergency room
wondering,
phone call.
yes. And now I'm like, is he referring to himself? Like, is he the horror that she's drawn to?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yes. He's an addict, and he also is physically abusive towards his child, for whom he appears to have very little genuine affection. So I think this is somebody who I think he deeply resents and, in fact, actively hates his wife. And I think that's true before they get to the Overlook.
Yeah.
Well, there are very interesting moments in the movie throughout where at one point he calls his wife the old sperm bank upstairs.
Oh my God. I wrote that down and was like, okay, whose misogyny is showing in this instance? Is it the Jack character? Is it
But I do think
Stanley
he
Kubrick?
loves...
Or is it Stephen King?
I do think he loves Danny. I don't know if he loves Wendy.
So,
But I do genuinely think that he loves his son.
so Jessica's read the book. I have not.
Yeah, I haven't either.
The little bit that I've read online about it, something that I think sounded very cool about the book that the movie does not have, is I think the book does have him really have love and affection for Danny. And Danny can see it. And there are times where he can talk to his dad versus whatever's possessed his dad.
Yeah,
The
he tries
movie,
to pull his dad out of it, and the endings are different. In the ending in that one, the dad sacrifices himself to save the family.
Oh, then no wonder King despised
Yes.
the adaptation, because the adaptation removes the heart of goodness. So this film completely, for me at least on the surface, seems to almost completely eliminate the Jack Torrance's love and true, like, caring for his family. And so if I were the author and I wrote this thing that was basically, in a sense, my memoir of sorts of addiction and of finding a redemptive aspect,
Right,
I'd be
there's
fucking
no-
mad. I would, because for me, like, he's so I feel like he must have been so close to this novel that to see it done differently must have fucked him up.
I think even not being close to it, not having written it, not having real stakes in it, I personally like a narrative where the antagonist, who is also kind of a protagonist, has more shades of gray, whereas I think Jack in the movie is much more villainous.
Oh, he's an asshole from the start. From the
Yes.
start, we're sitting there in that room with him where he's doing that interview with Mr. Stuart Ullman, where we're like, this is menacing.
Yeah, there's something uncanny about it. He's already off.
Mhm.
This will be the podcast where I defend everything.
Well, I was going to say, I know
because
Jessica.
I'm so in love with this movie and I think it's perfect. And for me, I have my own daddy
Jessica
issues.
hates character development too. So
I
you
don't
want
hate. I don't hate character development. In slasher movies, I don't want it. But in this movie, I have my own issues with my father, and I really not that my father is a murderer, but I love in the beginning that it's very relatable to me that Jack Torrance is just kind of a little bit condescending, or he's a little bit like, they'll be fine.
Mhm.
And a little bit, and then it kind of like grows, and I feel like it's a very relatable thing, that feeling that he has of like a man who's like, I've done everything for you. Can you just give me a minute? Kind of what he says like throughout, and it keeps building.
I agree.
And then I think it turns into a horror film in the sense of like you take that and you exacerbate it to a scary level where he's murdering
I agree.
people.
I think it's almost scarier if there are still those moments of love and tenderness because that's what draws you back in. And we never really see that with Shelley. Of course, this is easy for me to say. Like, I couldn't make a movie half as good. It is a great movie, but I do want some of that moment. Like, just where he gives her a little bit of love, because that's how abusers do it, is like they breadcrumb you. And there's even a reference to breadcrumbs, like a Hansel and Gretel reference early on.
I kind of love that there isn't that moment in this, because I feel like in so many movies that already exists. And I kind of love in this that he's gone. And maybe with the book The Shining, what I didn't love about it is it's like, no, he sacrificed himself for everybody. It's okay. He really was a nice guy. And I like in this that it's like, maybe he wasn't a nice guy.
Right. I can
maybe
get
that's
that.
okay too. Like there are just people that aren't nice people in the end.
It sounds like the book he is...
You can't save everybody.
In the book, it sounds like he's redeemed. In the movie, he's not. I would like for him not to be redeemed, but to have a couple redemptive moments. Just to fuck with you, because that's what happens, is like, bad people aren't bad all the time, and good people aren't good all the time.
Right.
So,
What could add some shades to his character to help
Yeah.
us understand and to make him less of like a cardboard villain and her a cardboard
Yes.
victim. Why has she stayed with this man? I recognize that it is happening in the late 1970s and that she does not have as many options as she would today. However, I still am questioning, like, why has she stayed with this obviously abusive man? And the response, of course, I mean, as somebody who stayed with somebody who hit me, like, I understand that there is, you love them, you want them to change, you think that you have the ability to help them change. You remember how they were when they were more charming, and whether it's in a short-term relationship like mine was, or a very long-term relationship where there's a child involved, the stigma at that time against divorce was much greater. So I get it.
Well, and she makes a point when she's talking to the doctor. She says that Jack said, Wendy, I'm never going to touch another drop of alcohol, and if I do, you can leave me. So I think that works. That's in there to her credit to be like, obviously there's been a conversation about her leaving. And that's how he has reeled her in, is like, no, I'm changing. I promise I'll never
and so
do
far
it
he
again.
has. I also noticed when the doctor comes, and granted, as the movie goes on, there's much more reason for this because it's very cold, but she's covered head to toe. Like, not only is she in this dress that looks like a weird blue picnic blanket, but then underneath it, she's wearing what looks to be like a full red bodysuit that goes all the way like past her ankles, covers her wrists, up her collarbone. I hate it. But part of me is like,
desexualized. Yeah.
Very good point. I thought maybe she's covering bruises. Maybe she has to hide all of her body because that's going to be an alarm.
But I think they do make a point that he hurt the son once. He doesn't hurt her. There's
or
no
she doesn't care because...
But there's no reference in this aside from that he's ever physical abusive except that one incident. So that would be my only argument against that is I think he's very emotionally abusive.
I agree. I don't think there's tons of evidence to support my theory that she's physically abused, but I did think it was interesting that she was so covered. And she is for the whole movie, but then, of course, it's very cold where they are.
She's also
take
very
it-
childlike in this, which I think
yeah.
speaks to that of, like, being talked down to, and even the age difference between them.
The way that she is, the way that they did her wardrobe, the way that her makeup is done, the way that her hair is done, she is very much, she is not a sexual object.
Yeah.
And she is not, they do not have a sexual warmth between them.
No.
That's gone. We can assume perhaps it was there once. So she is not, we as the audience are not set up to look at her as an object of desire. We are set up to look at her as she's mostly frightened, cowering, her body language. I mean, she makes some really solid choices that feel so real.
And she's so optimistic at first when they're in the hotel. And
Well-
she's like, it's going to snow. And do you want to go outside? And
it's
do you
so
want to go in the
heartbreaking.
maze? And like where she's running the maze with her son is
So
always so
cute.
sweet.
Although another thing, a reason why Stephen King might have hated the movie, I read that he had written her to be much stronger in the beginning. So she's deteriorating as the story unfolds, as opposed to where we start with a sort of fragile flower.
Which I always really, so when I read the book, I was really surprised because I didn't know that it was so different. And I was reading the book, and every time it's like he's typing in the living room or whatever, I was like, oh, I wonder when he starts typing all work and no play. Like, when does that start? I can't wait to figure it out. That's not in the book.
Oh, wow.
That never comes up. And I
it's
was
such
shocked.
an iconic piece.
Because that's my favorite part of the whole movie is that scene. And so when my kind of take on this, which is going to be different than Mr. King's, is that I liked where she starts because I think it makes more sense that this has been an abusive relationship and she's already starting from a place that's on lesser footing than him. And it's going to take more for her to get out of that hotel, which it physically does at the end. She's got to deal with all those. It's like scare after scare after scare. She can't get out of it. And I feel like that was a metaphor for the relationship, that she's trying to get her way out and she can't find the exit.
Speaking of scare after scare, and I wonder how it does it in the book, something that I thought was interesting, and I want to be very clear that I'm not shitting on it because it is a very well-made movie, but something that is funny to me when I see something and go like, that shouldn't work, but then somehow it does. And something that shouldn't work is there's so many quote-unquote scary things, right? Like, we get the backstory of, in 1970, this man killed his 2 daughters and his wife and himself. And then we find out that it's like on a Native American burial ground.
I love that throwaway line.
Yeah, like this was just on a Native American.
That's so weird, but that's
and
so
then the
dumb.
kid has this shining. The kid has this like
cool.
ESP.
I think it's cool he's got the shining. Like, I like that. But why is it that only with like Native First Peoples and Aboriginal peoples are their burial grounds haunted? Like, what the fuck? Like, my family's Italian. Like, why aren't our fucked up burial grounds full of my trash dead relatives like haunted? You know, like, wasn't the local like Japanese burial ground haunted? And it's so much about like how horror in this country has mostly been done by white people through a white lens with like another group as the other.
But also, 100%, I think it is that when white people came, they took over that land and they were like, we don't care that this was your cemetery. Whereas like white cemeteries, people don't usually build on top of.
That's true. It's part of the concept is like, but it's part of the idea that like we've disgraced this ground.
So then they leave their son for this tour, which is that normal? Is it the time there were pedophiles in the 70s or 1980?
I think these are probably somewhat negligent parents to an extent.
Oh, yeah.
But also, you know, in defense of negligent parents, I was a latchkey kid. And I used to go to work with my mom when no one could take care of me. And she would just leave me in random rooms at the university.
Exactly. And now you're a murderer.
And that was the
That's
90s.
my
so
point.
I feel like this is fine. They're just leaving him around. But that scene where he's in the game room and he turns around and those 2 little girls walk in and they're holding hands and they don't say anything. One looks at the other looks at the first one, and they kind of smile to each other like they know something. And then they just turn around and leave. Is so goddamn scary. And it's so scary because everyone's still there. It almost feels like the hotel is on to Danny. Like they get his shining and they're like, we see you.
The Shining I had no memory of that being being a verb or an ability until, I hadn't seen this since high school, so I was shocked at how little I remembered. But that was pretty cool.
We should explain at least what The Shining means.
Yes.
Dick has The Shining, and he says he and his grandmother used to have The Shining, where they could have conversations with each other without opening their mouths. And he starts kind of testing Danny. He sends him a message that says, like, do you like ice cream? Mm-hmm. And then he explains the 2 of them are left alone while the parents go to check out the boiler room. And he kind of has that conversation where he says, like, this hotel is you know, alive, kind of. I'm trying
leaves
to
an imprint.
Is that
yes.
Do they then have clairvoyance and clairaudience, or is that not what that's called? The fact that they can
I was
communicate
thinking that's
in that
kind
way.
of what it is. Dick explains it as, okay, you know, when something happens, it can leave a trace of itself behind. Say, like, if someone burns toast. Maybe things that happen have other kinds of traces, but leave other kinds of traces behind. Not things that anyone can notice, but things that people shine can see. But he does say stay out of room 237.
He does, which makes it seem like
you have to. Everybody knows stay out of room 237.
So I want to address that my screen name in high school was GR Fly 237. Nothing to do with The Shining. I was a really big fan of the band Bush, and my favorite tracks were 2, 3, and 7, and the GR Fly, people just inserted with their brains an L there, and they'd be like, girl fly, fly girl. And I was like, no, the GR is for Gavin Rossdale.
Oh my God.
and
GR
Fly
his lower abdomen during the fucking
God.
glycerine video.
He was so hot. And then Greedy Fly was one of their songs that I loved. So that's a fun aside. I also, before we move on from the Shining abilities, I think it's interesting, and they never quite address this, that Danny has Tony. Tony is a scary finger that moves up and down like it's talking and does a creepy voice.
Tony lives inside his mouth.
He says Tony lives in his mouth, but then he does a thing with the finger.
Yes.
he does a finger thing too. So it's like Tony lives
like
in
a
his
little
mouth and
puppet.
his finger. And then he says
Well-
when he's scared, he goes down to his belly.
Yes.
When Tony's scared or when Danny's
When
scared?
Tony's scared, but probably the same thing.
Yeah, Tony is a character that has vulnerability. And Tony is, I mean, Danny is disassociating, so that's frightening. And the way that they explain it away as an imaginary friend is very interesting and quite
Yes.
typical. And I mean, the one brilliant thing about this film and about this story is the way in which it takes very common, real things, an abusive alcoholic father, a very stressed mother just trying to keep the family together, and a child who, having experienced early trauma, is going to have some PTSD and manifest some symptoms around that. And in this case, the child happens to dissociate. It adds the magical element, which I love.
Yes, well, and I love that sort of blending of the two, where we address The Shining as a real thing that he can do, but then the Tony piece of it is very much just a traumatized child with a coping mechanism that lets him dissociate.
But
Tony
Tony
is-
has some magic to him as
Yeah,
well.
because
Tony can see things.
That's what they say.
But is it
it's
Tony
like-
seeing things, or
yes,
is it?
it
You think
is.
it's not Danny?
He says it's like I'm asleep and he shows me things, but when I wake up, I can't remember everything.
But is it actually Tony showing him, or is it The
Yes.
Shining and he's
Oh.
just named him Tony?
It
You
may
know?
be one or
I
the other,
don't-
but certainly
I
there's a
don't
magical
know.
element.
Tony might very well be real.
Well, and Tony knows things that he doesn't. He knows that Jack is accepting the job. He's about to call your
Yeah,
mother
Tony
right
is
now.
psychic.
He says that.
but is
Tony
it
is
Tony being
psychic.
psychic, or is it The Shining?
Whether Tony is an outside entity or Tony is just how he personifies his special ability, clearly it's so comforting to Danny to have Tony because he has an ally in this household where he's clearly been raised in emotional chaos. He's not an adult child of an alcoholic. He's a tiny child of an alcoholic. And his dad has not gotten the help he needs to adjust his behaviors. And his mother has not gotten the help she needs to adjust her behaviors. So they're stuck, not to equate her, she's not certainly an abusive individual, but she's in this codependent dance, right? And like, so Danny, with no siblings, doesn't have anybody to bounce this off of. I feel fortunate that in my own upbringing, very different from Danny's, but that I have a brother, even now, that we can be like, what the fuck, mom and dad, really? Danny doesn't have that. So Tony is his witness, and Danny is magic and knows that magic is not normal. So, and only when he meets Dick Halloran does he hear that other people have this thing that he clearly has had his whole life.
Yeah.
Well, and I love the next scene where it's like 1 month later. I love the title cards. But it's
I'm
I
so
love a
bad.
good title card. I
I'm
really
so
do.
bad at that. The time, I feel like numbers and time passing, it just goes right over my head.
But I think that's why it's nice to have that. And if some people hate it in film and television, but I love it because I too can be like, wait, where are we in the story? And so it really
well,
helps
this
to
is
have
great
that.
for the cabin fever element. So you know that we're a month in and things are going fine.
Mhm.
There was nothing to talk about, nothing to show us. Things are
a
going
month
great.
without incident, except
And-
for these horrifying visions that Danny has.
But as far as we know, he hasn't had any in that month. So as
I
far
assume
as
he's had them. But
I assume that, I mean, this is just how I feel about filmmaking, that they'll show us when something happens. So nothing's happened.
But we do know that the book that Jack has ostensibly been working on has been gobbledygook
We
from the
don't know
beginning,
when
right?
that starts. We never, that was what I was so excited to read about in the book, The Shining, and it's not in there, was I was like, at what point does he start typing that? And at what point does he like give up on writing his own book?
Mhm.
And we don't know because she does see those pages, but we never get a sense of like when that started, if it was always that way or if it's just been that way
yeah,
for like
earlier
a
when
month.
she comes in, he tears up the pages. And we
So
don't
we have
see.
no idea.
Yeah.
Ooh, and
But-
so much of the character, our understanding of the character would depend on that key.
When it says 1 month later, and then the camera follows Danny as he's riding around the hotel on this big wheel. And I was watching this with my husband, and my husband was like, this part always feels really comforting to me. The sound of
I
the
love the
wheel going on
sounds,
the
yeah.
carpet,
The
carpet
going
and
on
then
the
the
wood,
hardwood.
going on the carpet.
That's one of my favorite moments. is
And
the-
it really
the sound
gives
design
you
there.
a 360 tour of this hotel.
Yeah.
You're getting the layout, and nothing happens. You're like expecting something to happen, and nothing happens.
Yes.
And there's 3 of these scenes, and the first one, nothing happens. And the second one is when he sees that the door to room 237 is open,
Mhm.
but nothing happens. And then the third one is when you get the 2 little girls that say, come play with me. And it's such good, like, setup. Because the first one, you think it's going to happen, and nothing happens. And so then the other ones, you're less on edge. So we're a month into their isolation, and this is where we get the scene where she's, like, wheeling the food. And
Mhm.
he eats it in bed, Jack does. And he says, I love it, I really do. I've never been this happy or comfortable anywhere.
I feel like I've been here before, almost as if I knew what was going to be around every corner.
And I love in this part that Wendy says, you know, at first I thought it was scary.
But I was so silly then.
I just love that she acknowledges that, because she does say earlier, right before the guys leave, like when the hotel's bustling, the boss guy says, by 5 o'clock it'll be as if nobody was ever here, which always gives me the creeps.
Oh, got
and
it.
she's like, just like a ghost ship.
I think part of the irritation
So maybe she does
with
like
her
ghost stuff.
is the fact that she seems in such deep fucking denial of what seems very obvious to the rest of us. And part of why it's obvious to the rest of us is because of the music cues. It's because of Kubrick's choices.
And maybe this is that horrible female trait that's beaten into us to not trust our own instincts. But I feel like I could see myself without the music just being like, it's just frightening because it's a big empty hotel. It's 100%. Scary, but everything's fine.
I have stayed in places where I tried to convince my mom that we needed to get out. And she was like, you're crazy.
I've stayed in romantic relationships. I've stayed in jobs where I was like, ooh, a friend of mine said to me once, she said something very profound I felt. It's very simple. I said, I have this gut feeling I'm not supposed to go on this second date, but maybe that's just me, like, being afraid of intimacy or whatever. Maybe I'm supposed to, like, make a human connection with her. And she said, Sarah, the gut feeling is the reason. You don't need another reason.
Oh, that's good.
And she said, we are trained as women to not trust that sinking sensation, that fear that when our hair picks up on our arms or in the back of our neck, we are trained to ignore that because it is unpleasant.
It's so tricky because it can be really hard to differentiate your gut from just fear of being
and anxiety.
Succeeding. Yes. I did have, I went to go see a rated R movie when I was in high school. And we were not old enough.
Get out! We're fired!
I went with my friend Alina and my first kiss, a boy named Elliot. And maybe I was being a little flirtatious because the guy who ripped our tickets could have been like, wait, you're going into that R-rated movie, not the movie you paid for. So I was like a little friendly, a little over-friendly. And he asked for my number. And I gave it to him. And then we went into the theater, and I was like, I feel really weird about that. I don't know why I didn't give him a fake number.
I feel weird about that right now, just listening
I gave him, get ready.
I'm such a mom. I'm like,
love it.
oh no, why did you do that?
I know, I was like, why did I? So my friend Alina.
You were trained to be nice. You were trained to be nice.
Yeah. My friend Alina is like, don't worry, I got you. She goes back out there and is like, my friend forgot that she moved, and takes back the number and is like, she gave you her old number. Here's her new number. Flash forward,
Alina.
2 years later, I'm in public school and they pass around. I don't know why I said public school like that, whatever. I'm in my class and they're in homeroom. They pass around. There's 2 types of predator sheets. There's like, I'm forgetting the language. One is like a deliberate predator where they like sort of stalk you. And one is like a off the seat of their pants predator. And I remember the guy's name was Josue and he had these very clear blue eyes, like almost transparent. And I remember saying to Alina, he had really nice blue eyes. And she's like, yeah, but did you see the rest of him? And we laughed. Anyway, the sheet goes around. Josue is on this predator
Joshua
list with clear blue eyes. It's in black and white, but you can still see that like transparency.
Wait, they had
hold on.
Yes, they passed around.
Was this post Megan's list?
I don't know. What's Megan's list?
Law.
Megan's Law. Sorry, Megan's Law. Not Megan's list.
Megan's
it's where you go shopping for a predator.
Sexual predators that live in your neighborhood.
Yeah, it was after a child was murdered, and so that in the United States there is a sex offender registry, and so you can Google it at any time. I've done it when my sister-in-law and brother did it when they were choosing a home to purchase.
And I was right.
Holy fuck, dude! You knew it. Mm-hmm. You knew it. That's amazing. And what a valuable lesson for you to learn as a teen, because you didn't do anything wrong. You did what you were trained to do, which was to be sweet and kind and compliant. Mm-hmm. Even if you were also taught to be questioning and curious and be a strong woman, you're still taught to be strong but vulnerable, but nice. You don't want to make anybody feel bad. I think that
men don't have that, I feel like. Men don't have our intuition, that strong feeling, which is why in these movies they're always like, you're crazy. And I think it's interesting in these horror movies, we're on the 3rd one now, that it doesn't seem like it matters what the gender of the writer or the director is. That's always a part of these stories, is that the woman is the first one to say, I think something's wrong, and the man is the one that says, you're crazy.
It's pretty cool. Women are like superheroes.
We're magical. We're magical.
And to cut back to the movie, she's in the maze with Danny, and it's got that like kind of cool music, like kind of alien music a little bit. And then it like heightens and builds to like this crashing, but it crashes on Tuesday. That title card. That part makes me laugh every time. It is one of my favorite parts.
Is it just like a jump cut to Tuesday? Like,
it's
like bam, and jump cut to Tuesday.
It's like, God, everybody hates Tuesday.
Wait,
fucking Tuesday!
Is it before Tuesday that we see Jack I think that's intercut with the maze where we see Jack throwing the ball against the wall and
Yes.
it's reverberating. That also is so scary to me, and it meets
And
my
the tennis
sound.
ball comes back later.
Yes, it's really wonderful sound design and score, probably
it-
more than anything I've seen in recent history.
But it's like at this point in the movie, when they're running outside and it's sunny, he's bouncing the tennis ball. And then when you see them running outside in the blizzard, he is standing in front of the window, not blinking with his mouth open.
Oh yeah, that's really creepy too.
I
So it's like to show like the progression of his madness through time.
I think that sound in horror is more important than maybe in any other genre.
Yeah, I
of
agree.
motion picture.
I mean, there were so many moments. Oh, I'm sure you guys have seen that fake trailer for Shining.
It's so good.
It's so good. So
I
there were
never have.
moments. Oh my God, we're gonna watch it right after this.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Where they basically do a trailer for The Shining if it was a heartwarming family drama.
Yes. And they have that voice go like Shining.
Love the concept.
Like,
really into the execution. Cheap to produce. Great. Good
It's
job.
it really highlights how much of a difference the music makes. Different music, and this could almost be a heartwarming film.
And editing.
Yes, of
I
course.
find it kind of heartwarming and comforting, but that's because I have positive associations from my friend Tracy and Kristen's house watching it when we were little. My most uncomfortable moment is when the racist ghost bartender drops an N-bomb.
Oh my God.
That's my least favorite part of the movie, and it
So
makes me feel
uncomfortable.
bad every
It
time.
always
It's
makes
the
me feel bad, and then Jack says it again. You're
You're like, Jack, shut up!
Like Grady
Fuck
says it.
you!
Grady
Ugh.
says it, and there's that minute where you're like, okay, this was a different time.
I never felt that way. I always was
don't-
like, fuck this.
But it's like every time he says it, I'm like, okay, it was a different time, and I
Mm-mm.
don't know what's going on, and like it's okay, whatever, blah. And then immediately Jack says it again, and you're like, God damn it.
Yeah, like it was gross when Grady was alive in like the 1930s or whatever. It was definitely not okay in like 80. And it's like, Jack, I get that you have a lot of problems, but maybe your biggest problem of all is white privilege.
Also like that Jack is acting like a real writer because he's doing anything but writing.
Yeah, no,
Which
that's
is
true.
Okay, so we have that amazing music that ends with the crash on Tuesday. And it ends with the crash on Tuesday because Tuesday is when things start going wrong. Tuesday is when she interrupts his writing to say, Weathercast says it's going to snow tonight.
Oh my God.
And she's like, do you want me to come back in a little bit with some sandwiches and maybe let me read something then? And I almost wonder if it's what sets him off is her
Oh.
saying, can I read what you're writing?
Yes, because she's intruding into his personal
Not
world.
just that she's
Interesting.
intruding, because he's like, you're distracting me, but I almost feel like that line,
Yeah.
he's like, mind your own fucking business.
And to me, it's so heartbreaking because, and maybe it's as a writer, but I'm like, oh my God, she's like trying to feed you and support your art. And she just wants to read what you're working on so she can tell you you're a good boy. And then you
Yeah.
explode at her. It
And
made
he
me so
explodes
sad.
by establishing a new rule. Whenever I'm in here and you hear me typing, and this is the part that kills me where he demonstrates what typing sounds like.
Oh.
Whether you don't hear me typing, whatever the fuck you hear me doing in here, when I am in here, that means that I am working. That means don't come in. Now, do you think you can handle that?
It's also a huge sprawling area that she's just not allowed in whenever he's there. It's like, I'm going to
Yeah.
take the most spacious area and claim it as my own. For any time I'm here, you are not allowed in here.
That part doesn't bother me as much because it's a humongous hotel.
It's
But
true,
he's making it hugely inconvenient for her, and he's
Yeah.
taking over space, and their relationship is so shitty, and for many, many reasons. And one of the reasons is that they are very mismatched, and that they can't just communicate about it. And also, of course, he's haunted by ghosts.
But this is what happens, I think, and not to make a generalization, but when you go from your dad's house to your husband's house, and you know, like not being somebody who maybe lived on her own or had her own
Right,
job,
yes.
went
Right.
straight from an older man telling her what to do to an older man telling her what to do.
No sense of identity of her own, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I never think that she's like dumb or why isn't she doing this? I'm like, because you have to learn to
I
trust
think
your
she's just
instincts.
broken
I
more
think
than
she's
dumb.
just really young.
Yeah. There's no time where she's like, okay, here's where I can say let's take him to a hospital. Like he's gonna fly off no
Well, and
matter
he
what she
says,
does.
don't come in here if you hear me typing. Don't come in here if you don't hear me typing.
Yeah.
Like, don't come in here is basically, it's like, well, but what if I, you know, like for me,
Yeah.
it's like, how can I follow that rule? Just don't ever see you.
Right.
Because if I see you, you might not be typing, but you might not want to see me. And it's
Also,
these
the
are
worst part
impossible
of me
rules.
related to him. Not, I would never say
No,
it
I
in
hear
that
that
way.
too. I'm like, get the fuck out of my face.
I
I'm
know.
trying to
I
write.
hate when I'm working on something and Amir's just like, "Is this dish clean?" I'm like, "Go fuck yourself." You know,
Like, get out of
how
my
dare
face.
you? I don't know. Look
it
at
happens
the dish.
to me more with my mom. When my mom is like trying to talk to me, and I'm like, no, I've clearly set a boundary. Please respect that boundary.
Yeah.
And Jack, of course, is like an actually abusive human
Yes.
being.
He is
but
deeply in the wrong.
I also feel like at what point is she going to read the room? It's not about the room never be right. The room is never going to be the room is never going to be affable and welcoming to her. So like maybe get your kid and get out. Like leave. In the film, I do not get a whole lot of backstory to her character or understanding of why
and
they're
Stephen
in
King
this
agrees
thing
with
together.
you. He says that the depiction of her is sort of dumb and like incapable, and he said it's misogynistic.
I
disagree
think
with
he's
that.
correct.
I do
No,
too,
I agree
but-
with him. I think it's a misogynist. I think Kubrick was a misogynist.
Oh,
to
I
an
think
extent,
Kubrick
and I
definitely
think
was,
that's why
too.
the film's portrayal is, even though the co-writer was a woman. Like, I think that we are. I think we're meant to be annoyed by her and for her to be shrill. I think that's how Kubrick.
I love that
directed
we
her.
all have different interpretations of it because I'm not annoyed by her at all. I do have so much empathy for her, and I think part of me would like to see the version where she starts off strong and is gradually broken, but I also like in this version where she's so broken, she's so childlike, she's so dependent, and she finds her way out. Like to me, she really
Yeah.
does step up and she
That's
finds
how I
this strength.
feel.
And even the bat scene, which, you know, famously,
Is my favorite scene. That long following.
oh my God, it's
up
so
the
good.
stairs, and you follow this whole.
But you know, it's in the Guinness Book of Records for he made her do it, I think, 127 times.
Jesus.
And so
But
she was
also-
falling apart. It was abusive. That
Yeah,
scene is the
he was
product of abuse,
abusive,
but it
yeah.
is a
and you can
beautiful
see it on
scene.
the screen. She doesn't want to have to
I
hit him.
know.
She
Ugh.
doesn't want to. She wants him to just leave her alone, and it's so heartbreaking and sad. And her acting is so good, and he's so
she's a
menacing.
great actress throughout. Like
Oh my
that's.
gosh.
She's a wonderful actress throughout. I think that
She's
I would
just
say
pleading with him.
I think Shelley Duvall rises above the material and does the most possible with what she had, especially considering the circumstances, the labor circumstances
my
that she
God.
was under. I think that her character could have been better served with some more nuance, but I think the actress does a spectacular job. And also the fact that she's not holding the bat properly. Like
Oh.
she's
Oh, I
not
love
choking,
it.
you know,
I love it.
that's a
Oh
really
my
great
gosh.
that
note.
scene is
yeah.
so good.
Then it cuts to Saturday, where we establish that the phones aren't working, and she has to use a CB radio.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I watch The Shining, afterwards I watch the episodes of The Simpsons where they do the shinning. And that CB radio scene makes me laugh so hard because in The Simpsons, they do one where Marge calls and it goes to Chief Wiggum. And it's like, you know, my husband is murdering everyone. We need help, blah, blah, blah. And then she goes, over. And Chief Wiggum goes, oh, thank God that's over. That sounded horrible. And so every time I see that scene in this, it makes me
That's
laugh
great.
because I'm thinking of Chief Wiggum. But so then Saturday is when the phones don't work. We get our third big wheel scene
Love it.
where we get
Product
the
placement.
twins. Turns the quarter.
Love the twins. They're very cute today.
Love the floral wallpaper. And they say, hello, Danny. I'm going to not say it like that.
The actresses are in their 50s
Hello,
now, I
Danny.
think.
Come play with
yeah.
us. Come play with us, Danny, forever and ever.
Would they kill him,
Ever.
do you think, if he did go and play with them?
Well, if what Dick said is right,
They can't hurt him.
yeah, but then why is room 237 so dangerous?
Is that
Why
the
is
room with
GR
the
Fly
blowjob?
237 so scary?
Or is
yeah,
that the room with the naked old lady?
I think it's
That's
the room with the naked old lady. What's the room with the blowjob?
The
That's
most
later.
terrifying thing in all of the most haunted hotel in history is a woman who ages poorly.
Well, she's also dead. The little girls say, do you want to come play with us forever and ever and ever? And then it cuts to Monday. So we're really traveling through time here.
Mm-hmm.
But that is when Danny wants his fire truck.
Okay,
And he convinces his mom to let him go into their little apartment where Jack is sleeping. So the girl said forever and ever and ever. And then when he goes into Jack's room to get the fire truck, Jack is awake and he brings him over and he says, I wish we could stay here forever and ever and ever. And I never noticed that until this
That's
time.
pretty great.
That those scenes are back to back. It's the hotel talking now through him.
my greatest emotional fear in the entire movie is Danny begging to sneak in for his fire truck. And I think that is really great character development because at this point, I'm just scared for this poor abused little boy to be mistreated by his father because all he wants is his fire truck. And I don't know how to explain it other than that, but I was terrified.
That has the same music as the hedge maze scene.
Interesting. I wonder what they're saying with that.
Well, the specter of the abusive adult, the adult who is supposed to be your protector, who is a monster who could hurt you,
Yes.
is vastly more frightening and realistic than the ghost.
So now it's Wednesday. And this is the tennis ball. He's playing, and the tennis ball comes into frame that we saw earlier with Jack.
And we both immediately, you and I, and Amir, because we just recorded Funny Games, are like, this reminded me of my favorite part of Funny Games. Where
When the
it's just,
golf ball comes out of nowhere, and it's like, man, in life, when balls come out of nowhere,
They came from somewhere.
Yeah, it's not going to be good.
It's not
true. That's
You wanna know
And
where
this
that
is
ball
what
coming
leads
from.
him to room 237.
Also, I want to quickly address the Apollo sweater because I had so many thoughts like, oh, what is he? Why is he? He's in a Mickey Mouse shirt, little Danny, and now he's in this Apollo sweater. And I was like, is it something about the god Apollo? But then I saw that there are all of these conspiracy theories that Stanley Kubrick was involved in faking landing on the moon.
That's so
Yes.
funny.
If
And that
you-
this
if you're
is
interested-
That's so funny.
How crazy is that?
I think it's just that the space program was alive and well, and that he's wearing some Apollo
yeah,
jams.
I think it's
If
much
you're-
simpler than
yeah.
If
But
you're
they thought-
interested in deep diving into any of this also, watch the documentary Room 237.
Yes, we are not going to be able to cover everything, but we're talking about what is exciting and interesting to us.
Right.
And to me, it's exciting and interesting that fans have been like, this is his way of apologizing. This is his nod to tell people I regret faking the moon landing, so I'm putting him in this Apollo sweater, which I do not
If
believe.
I faked the motherfucking moon landing, I would be like, yeah, I fucking did it. It was dope as fuck. I'm not apologizing for shit.
Danny comes in sucking his thumb, and to me, this is the point where there's no going back. This is the end of the happy family. There's never a scene where Wendy and Jack are okay again.
Yeah, Danny has regressed, which is really sad.
It was so
Because he was
sad.
abused by the woman. She strangled him.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack doesn't. Wendy thinks Jack did it, and he doesn't believe. I don't know. This whole part makes me sad.
Yeah,
There's no alcohol. And he says,
for insurance
God,
purposes.
I would give anything for a drink. I'd give my goddamn soul for just a
Yes.
glass of beer.
Mhm.
Enter Lloyd. And now the bar is full.
And what's the thing?
Does
that
he
I,
give his soul? Is that the moment? Is that like what they're saying? That this is there's no going back? He's given
I think
his
it's
soul to
one
the
of the
hotel?
things that they're saying.
That's cool.
I really like
I
that.
like that note.
What's
That's cool.
what's the thing with the devil where they trade the soul?
The Devil and Daniel Webster?
No, there's like a
Mephistopheles and Dr. Faustus?
Yes, yeah. The Faustian thing.
It's
yes.
a Faustian bargain. He just wants some booze, man.
For whatever reason, it really stuck out to me that Lloyd and Jack are both in maroon coats. It makes them both look like fixtures of the hotel.
I bet that King was pissed because King doesn't see himself as a misogynist, nor do I see King as a misogynist either. And I think that because the book, it sounds like, was a very nuanced kind of examination of a marriage in crisis and of him as an alcoholic and blah, 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 blah. I bet that that's part of why he didn't like it, was seeing the character who, for him, is his like other, right? He created a Jack Torrance, isn't him, but
It's
is
like a
kind of him.
proxy.
To hear, yes, his proxy, thank you, his proxy speak about this woman in a way that perhaps he himself would not. There's this anger. And again, that's part of what happens when an author signs away the rights to something and takes their paycheck
Made
and
a
then gets
Faustian deal.
and then
himself.
the author himself, you always do, because you sign away your fucking rights and it has to be adapted. And so it becomes somebody else's baby.
Mhm.
And when that's really personal to you, that must be tough.
It's something else. It's not yours anymore.
Mhm. And the ghosts are from the 1920s, are they not?
I think there's a mix.
Not all over, because Grady died in 1970.
Right.
Oh, okay. Which was the murder year.
He's the
Grady
one-
was the murder
Grady was the
dude.
murderer.
Okay. You're
Wait,
right.
aren't there? I think there were two different people with the same last name. Delbert Grady and a different Grady. There are two Gradys.
Grady is the one who murdered his family and is the waiter.
Hold on.
Because he says, Delbert Grady, I recognize you from the papers. You killed
Disgruntled
your whole family.
waitstaff and
There's
killed his whole family.
Delbert Grady and there's Charles Grady.
What?
Yeah.
And that, you might be onto something, but here is basically for clarity.
Okay.
Charles Grady killed his two daughters. He was the caretaker. But then when he sees Grady the waiter, he says,
Right. He's like, you killed your family. He says
Yes.
that he knows who he is.
Mr. Grady, you were the caretaker here. I recognize you. I saw your pic in the newspaper. You chopped your wife and daughter into little bits, then blew your brains out. So the name thing, I don't know why.
So were there
It could be different versions.
two
of
different
themselves.
Gradys who did two different murders?
Not
in
that
this
we know
film?
of.
Okay. So it also could just be an inconsistency, right? Like
Well, and it also-
continuity. Who was the script supervisor?
But I
But
think
it
that's
can
such a
also
big
be-
oversight.
It
It
can
is.
also
Overlook.
be the
Ha-
idea that
noise.
Jack is at the Overlook in 1920. Maybe he had a different name then, too.
yeah, because Jack is in some ways an incarnation of the caretakers who've come before, correct?
Yeah, so maybe maybe Delbert and Charles are the same. It's just
Delbert,
Over
Chuck,
time.
Jack. I mean, Delbert
If-
got like the cool name.
If anybody knows the answer to the Delbert Charles conundrum, please let us know.
Yeah,
If
I was-
there's,
How
like, a
can they
reason that I'm
contact you?
missing. On Instagram
Oh,
at
Tell me.
He's Right Behind You.
Yeah.
He's right behind you. At He's Right Behind You podcast.
Please let us
Great.
know. I would really like to know the answer to this one.
At what point do they stop hiring people with kids. Where you got to find a singleton. Like,
That's
where do you
true.
just find a single guy or gal and say, hey, you be here?
Unless it's like that's part of the hotel's power that it's wielding, is making the owner or whoever this guy is hire someone with kids because it wants the blood of children.
Yeah. He may just be an agent of the hotel, and he may be unwittingly being used to draw in what the hotel wants.
Yeah.
When I first saw this movie, when I was a kid, this scene, Room 237, scared the shit out of me.
Is it
She's
right
so
before that
naked.
we see Dick in his room for the first time, watching the reports on Miami? The naked women hanging.
He's got these gorgeous, like, 70s blaxploitation looking chicks with afros who are, like, naked, and it's very hot. I would also like to say that I'm looking up naked lady actress The Shining right now because I want to know who that actress was. Leah Beldam, I believe, was her name, or maybe it's Billy Gibson. I don't know, one or the other. I have
one
no
is
idea.
probably the old lady at the end, and one is the young lady in the beginning.
What a fox. I'm about it. Watching
Yeah.
this as a youth, I was like, something's going on here. Later, I would discover it was bisexuality inside myself.
I also really wonder what the conversations with Kubrick were like regarding her pubic area, because it's sort of like a wild 70s landing strip. Like, it's a little bit
Well, it
bushy.
is the 70s.
But, like, was there a conversation? Like, how big is this bush going to be?
I think that was before
I
they
don't know.
understood that you could torture yourself.
No, I think
a
they
form of
know
beauty
because
to
she has a
wax.
little bit of a strip going on.
She may have shaved.
Maybe.
Like, there was not a lot. I don't know. There wasn't a whole lot of waxing. There was a lot of shaving. Nair was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was a kid watching this for the first time, I think nudity scared me. I mean, it still does in a way of, like, if somebody is naked and they don't seem aware that they're naked, that's always really scary to me. Because it's just like something's off. Why do they not seem to care that they're naked in a social situation?
I have a lot of questions now because I've never really thought in depth about her pubes, but I do want to know, like, how the trimming happened, and did they have an on-set, like, pube consultant?
I bet they didn't.
Is that part of
bet
hair
they
and
didn't.
makeup?
I bet they just let her be who they hired her.
No,
She
Kubrick,
made
I feel like is
choices.
very
Fox.
controlling.
I'm about
I feel
her.
like he weighed in on her pubic hair, but that there was not like a pube wrangler on set.
I
I
think she's such a fox. She's a total babe. If I was going to bang anybody in this movie, Jack Nicholson doesn't do it for me in this movie. He's not sexy to me in
I
this
want
movie.
to hold Shelley Duvall, not bang her. I just want to hold her.
I want to walk
Jack
her.
Nicholson is sexy to me in this movie.
Really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Jack goes into the hotel room with the naked lady. We talked about that a little bit. And then when he sees Wendy again,
He says he didn't see one goddamn thing. The little shithead. What's hilarious to me is she says, well, maybe it was the wrong room. And he says it had to be that room. The door was open and the lights were on. And she says, I just don't understand it. But also, it's a huge hotel. So there could have been someone in that room who left. Like,
That's true.
why does the scenario become he made it up or she would have been there? Like, she could have just left.
Jack comes back, says he didn't see her. And Wendy says, again, I think we need to get Danny out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And
he
says,
goes crazy.
You mean just leave the hotel? That is so fucking typical of you to create a problem like this when I finally have a chance to accomplish something, when I'm really into my work. Wendy, I have let you fuck up my life so far, but I'm not going to let you fuck this up. And this is where I wrote in my notes, fuck men.
Yeah, sure.
This is in so many ways about how you should absolutely not date an artist.
My interpretation of this Jack, separate from the book Jack,
Mm-hmm.
is this is a guy who is not doing well in life. And this hotel is, he thinks, like, gonna solve everything. This is a job. He's gonna be there for 5 months with his family. He's gonna be able to feed them. He's gonna make money off of it. And he's gonna have time to really write the novel that's gonna make him a hero. And I think that's why he's like, I've never been this happy. I love this place. Like, I think this really, he feels like I don't have to work on myself. This is the ticket out of all of our pain. And because he doesn't work on himself, it's not the ticket.
I think that's interesting.
That's a great way of looking at it. I really
Yeah.
like that
Because
a
he's
lot.
really optimistic in the beginning.
He has pinned so many hopes on this as a redemptive experience, and as he descends into madness and the ghosts of the hotel, there is a very real supernatural presence, I think we can say. It's not all imagined, right? There's real supernatural creatures, forces at work here. As that all continues to swirl and he descends worse and worse into murderous violence.
I think there's even a parallel that you could say off of your very interesting observation that he and Wendy might be similar in that way, where Wendy looks to Jack to change and to become a good dad, and then everything will be okay. And then Jack looks to the hotel to change him and afford him this opportunity, and then everything's going to be okay.
That's
and they
true.
both are
Wendy
so
hasn't
let
looked
down.
at herself to make change, and Jack looks at himself and goes, well, I took away the booze, so everything's fine, right? Which is the classic element of what's called a dry drunk, which is somebody who takes away the substance. It just takes them a little bit longer to get to the crazy place. And sometimes it takes them shorter.
But I think also, like, before he goes to the hotel, he's an out-of-work writer. And then he walks into that door of the hotel, and he's the caretaker.
Writer. Yeah.
He's
a
the
caretaker and a writer.
But I mean, like, he's literally the caretaker of the hotel. He's the caretaker of his family. And now he has a purpose.
Yeah. And he's a literal... We were speaking earlier about real life patterns for what are called family annihilators, so murderers who kill their families. They often have issues with debt. We can assume that there's a lot we have to assume here, but they are not in a great financial place. You're not in a great financial place if you choose to like go off to this,
Right.
They're not wearing
and the fact that he won't leave.
They're not wearing
what
elegant.
Are we gonna do?
Yes, and they're not wearing elegant upscale clothing. We know he was a teacher. He didn't really love teaching, and that job is done. We know that she's not employed outside the home. So we can assume, based on a lot of clues, that they're not in great financial situation. Mm-hmm. So all the more pressure, all the more him being like, this has to work or else.
Yeah.
I love the word pressure, too. I think that's so right.
Yeah, it's like a pressure cooker, the whole thing.
It's all on his shoulders.
And part of the beauty of this movie is the extraordinary way in which the sound design
and the camera
builds
work.
that. Yes. Oh, yeah.
You could see this as a psychological thriller. Maybe the hotel's not haunted. Maybe he's going crazy. But there's one moment in this movie that I always feel like confirms that the hotel is supernatural, which is it lets him out of the pantry.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That happens on its own.
To me, like, if you had taken that scene out, there's an argument that this
100%.
is all in their head.
I agree with you. Because there is a way to watch this film, aside from that scene, where we're going to have to do some inferring and assuming. For example,
gymnastics.
We would have to assume that either he really was abusing, choking Danny.
Because it's his tennis ball that comes into the shot. So you could argue he's the one who threw the tennis ball and opened room 237.
Or that Danny, and we could also say, oh, Danny's doing it to himself. I mean, we could look at this
Danny's protecting his dad by making up the naked lady.
A violently depressed alcoholic with clearly some sort of, he's having a psychotic break, some sort of untreated schizophrenic or bipolar tendencies or whatever, not that they're the same thing, but he's having some kind of hallucinations. Mm-hmm. And then we've got the abused woman who's deeply codependent and in denial for a lot of the film. And then we've got the child who is manifesting symptoms of abuse. There's a way to look at this that's quite profound.
He goes back into this ballroom, and it's bustling. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is when we meet Delbert Grady, the waiter, and Delbert runs into him with his tray where he's got a drink called Avital, which I looked up. It's a traditional Dutch alcoholic beverage made from eggs, sugar, and brandy. It's in the same family as like an eggnog. This scene is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. The two caretakers meeting in the bathroom. I love how he says corrected in this.
Oh my God, me too. That is my favorite part. I was trying to remember the word. Yeah,
I corrected them.
I actively hate
correct
it.
them too.
You hate it?
I hate the roll R because I'm like, you're racist, you're probably bad at your job, and you're a murderer, and you're pretentious. Come on. He also seems like a Star Wars villain.
I think he spills that on purpose.
Oh no, I just think he's overall bad at his job. I just feel like you should kill people on the job. It makes you bad at your job.
But what if your job is to kill people?
Then you're great at it.
So he's probably pretty good at it.
Ultimately, his job was to murder people.
I think
he fucking nailed it. One could even say he killed it.
I just love it. He's like, you've always been the caretaker, and I would know that because I've always been here.
Yeah.
It's so spooky.
It is spooky.
This is where he also says, your son is a very great talent. I don't think you're aware how great it is, but he's attempting to use that talent against your will.
Love it. Mm-hmm. Love it. I do love that.
Yeah.
And he says, my girls didn't care for the overlook at first. One tried to burn the place down, which I love that idea of like what happened before this, that the little girls were so scared they tried to burn the hotel down. He says, but I corrected them. And when my wife tried to prevent me from doing my duty, I corrected her.
Every time you roll your R for corrected, I want to first kill myself, but somehow at the same time kill everyone in this room, which is just the two of you, and set this whole place on fire. So I feel like it's very effective.
Yay. It makes me like language horny to hear someone say it like that. It's just so good.
It makes really my vagina sew itself up.
I don't know if language horny is something that I should ever say.
Not on like a football.
I think we got to use it. I mean, I've always loved the Scottish accent, so.
Is it? Well, that's not
Scottish.
Scottish.
Don't they roll their R's?
You guys, I, for some reason, really hate you guys trying to roll your R's.
The look of
I feel
disgust on
deeply
Sarah's face.
homophobic right
I
now.
love it.
So gross.
And I love how the little kid goes, red rum, red rum.
Oh, it's
I'm fine with that.
creepy.
I think it's 'cause he
reminds
doesn't
me
roll
of
the
like
R's.
a gremlin or something.
Yeah, he really sounds like a gremlin.
You guys, after this, I'm going to go see my therapist and be like, why do I not care when people generally roll their R's like in Spanish, but when they do it in English and they're a native English speaker, I get really mad. I don't know why.
Let us know what you find
Is it
out.
like you? Do you not like when people say I went to Barcelona?
Yeah, it feels
I
Do you
don't
not
like that either.
correct
I don't like
correct
that.
pronunciations?
I don't know, man. This is really, watching The Shining is great because it makes you examine a lot of yourself.
That is true.
So now we're to my favorite scene finally. Wendy with a bat. She reads his work. All work and no play make Jack a dull boy.
Maybe that's just his novel. And she's like, this sucks.
And I love her face as she's like flipping, and then it cuts to her and she's just getting more and more horrified as she's like realizing how crazy he's been for how long.
I also love that it changes shape. It like does some E.E. Cummings stuff. She's reading the notes, and then we have, I feel like we have to acknowledge this, then we have our moment of he's right behind you. I remember my hair standing up, and I was so scared. I'm like, he's right behind you. I wanted to shout it at the TV, and then he just goes, how do you like it? Oh,
This is my
so
favorite
creepy.
toxic movie couple stairway scene, except for when Rhett accidentally pushes Scarlett down the stairs and she has a miscarriage.
But I just love, she's trying to reason with him and she's like, we need to go. And he goes, I'm not going to hurt you, Wendy, darling, light of my life. I'm not going to hurt you. You didn't let me finish. I said, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your brains in.
Oh my God.
I'm going to bash them right the fuck in.
It's so creepy.
It's so scary. It's that point. There's no return. He's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she has to finally act and do something. And she hits him.
Go Wendy.
And
Even
he
Wendy
trips and falls down the
finally
stairs.
is like, oh, okay.
I almost wondered after he fell down the stairs, I was like, is she going to run to him and comfort him and be like, I'm so sorry?
No,
and I was so glad she
drags
didn't.
him
She
and
drags
locks
him.
him in the pantry.
But the pattern of abuse, like they finally fight back and then are like, oh no, I'm sorry. But I was really glad that she didn't.
It's that abusive thing. He tries to apologize and be like, it's okay, it's fine.
But only for half a second.
And then he starts laughing because he's like, you got a big surprise coming.
Yeah.
And that is that he disabled the radio and he disabled the snowcat.
Oh.
So now she's trapped. Because as we've heard throughout the movie, when we see different news broadcasts, is that there have been all these people that have gone missing in the snow.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was like a certain amount of people have died now from being exposed to the elements. So we, the audience, know she can't run without that
We have
snowcat.
so many villains at this point because we have the ESP, which I guess isn't a villain, and then we have all the ghosts in the hotel, and then we have the hotel itself, and we have the alcoholic dad/husband, and then we have the elements outside that we have to contend with.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, we're on a Native American burial ground.
We have man versus God. We have man versus nature. We have
Man versus self.
man versus self. Yeah, there's a lot
We got
going
it
on
all.
there.
And she goes back to the apartment and wakes up to Red Rum, which has been written on the door in lipstick, and then she sees in the mirror that it says murder. And it's like as soon as she sees it, this is such good editing and sound and everything. As soon as she sees it, you get the axe against the door because Jack is on the other side with the axe. I love this camera work. How he's like picking up the axe and he's hitting it against the door, and the camera's moving back with the axe every time and going forward. And the first time I ever saw this scene was in the movie Twister, because I saw Twister before I saw
Oh my God.
The Shining.
The
And-
cows.
But they're watching The Shining at a drive-through, and as the Twister is like coming through, and it's like destroying the drive-in theater. It's on that scene with the axe going against the door, and then it like gets destroyed by the Twister, and it's just like everything about it so ominous.
That was my first date to see Twister.
Really?
What's up, Dr. Mike Scanlon? How are you? You're a doctor now. Good for you.
And that's when Wendy and Danny run to the bathroom, and she locks him in the bathroom, and she's able to get him out the window, but she can't fit.
Oh, that
Which-
part's so scary to me when
Yeah.
she's trying to get out and he's on her tail.
I'm so claustrophobic. That part always really gets to me, where you can see how she tries to get out, and then she's almost stuck, like she can't really
Yes.
get back in easily.
I'm so grateful she's not bisected by that window. That would
Oh
have
my
been
God.
horrific.
I know, at least the hotel doesn't have that kind of power to where
Yeah.
like doors and stuff are slamming on you.
Yes, thank goodness.
And this is here's Johnny,
Yeah, the improvised line, one of the great moments.
where he breaks his way in.
Sticks his face in. Here's Johnny.
And she's got that knife and she cuts him.
Yep, that was a good move.
But I love also when he's trying to get into the bathroom, every time he hits the bathroom door with the axe, she screams.
Yes.
And it's just like this frantic, I feel like it's the realest screams.
Me too.
I've ever heard on film.
Maybe she's at her best maybe in this scene in the baseball scene.
It's just the franticness of her fear.
Yes.
And the snowcat comes. We all hear it. She hears it. He hears it. Everything kind of stops because they know someone's here. And that's Dick.
I love that. Yes.
And this legit, I think when I first saw this movie, the naked lady was the scary scene to me. But as an adult, every time I watch it, this is the scariest scene to me, which is Jack leaves and he's like hobbling with the axe, and we see that. But then it cuts to Dick is coming in, and he's like, hello, hello, and everything's quiet.
And Danny hides.
And I know, because I've seen this movie 1,000 times, that Jack is hiding behind one of these columns. And he's gonna run out and hit him with the axe. And every fucking time I watch this, I forget which column he's behind. And it's the last column. And so every time he passes a column, I'm like,
jump.
Yes, because I'm expecting Jack to come out, and then I'm like, okay, it's
and
not
we
that one.
love Dick. Like, he's not in it that much, but
the legendary
you just love
Scatman
him.
Brothers. He is fantastic. He is buried at Forest Lawn Cemetery, by the way, and I straight up want to make a pilgrimage. I mean,
Let's do it.
What an amazing
bonus
person.
episode.
He was the first, I believe, black actor cast on as a consistent cast member on a local Los Angeles television program. He was in Sanford and Son. He was in a ton of stuff. He was in 4 films with Jack Nicholson. And just an incredible musician and human, married to his wife till the day he died, I believe. I think he was married from 1937
I think it was
to
almost 50 years. Yeah.
It was a long ass time. Maybe, yeah. And just spectacular. And his performance is so imbued with warmth and generosity. And what a fantastic speaking voice with the gravity.
And when I first saw this, I was like, what was the point? He did all of that, and he gets there, and he dies, and it's
sacrifice.
Only through all these different viewings that it's like he has to come because she has no way out.
Yeah, the
but it's different
snowcat
in the
reveal.
book.
I think yes, he doesn't
die in
die.
the book.
I know, which I think is an interesting. I don't know if I'm totally on board. I would like for him to live.
Again, nodding to race in America and how it happened, how it's played out in horror. That the black character is often the sacrificial lamb. That's not an accident either.
Well, I do think, even though he's the sacrificial lamb, he is also the hero. I think there are 3 heroes of this movie, and they're all marginalized because it's a black man, a woman, and a child. Nobody takes kids seriously, but all 3 of them are straight heroes.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's the scariest scene to me. And when Jack Nicholson comes out and he hits him with the axe, he screams. Jack Nicholson screams when he does it.
Like a war cry.
Which, it's animalistic, though. It's guttural, and it always scares me. And then he hits him, and he stops screaming, and then Danny screams.
Yes, giving himself away.
That's so sad.
Yep, and then Danny jumps out. He was in a really good hiding spot.
He was. He could have just stayed there.
Jumps out, takes off outside into the maze. We get this big maze scene.
And he's so smart with his footprints, doubling back over
Which
his
Danny's
footprints.
so smart. I love Danny.
Which in Funny Games, maybe Funny Games was inspired by this. In Funny Games, the little kid is wet, and he takes off his socks and shoes and goes a different direction because he realizes he was making tracks with his wet socks.
Yeah, they both have smart kids.
Yeah. Guys,
and then
look at your tracks.
It is so smart. I wouldn't have thought to. I would have just been in panic.
I would have been in panic mode 100% and would have just hidden with my footprints next to
yes,
where I just
100%. It didn't even occur to me until he starts doing it. And then eventually, at 2 hours and 13 minutes, he declares, "I'm right behind you." Shout out to this podcast.
The right behindies, the right behinders. You really need to come up with a hashtag.
Let's get to Wendy's journey. Okay, so she leaves the bathroom once she's sure that Jack is gone. Then that's when she finds the guy with the furry.
Yes. Oh, Wendy sees the homosexuals.
Yeah, she's running up the stairs. She's
very
trying to get
troubling for a woman to see
that?
homosexuality.
It's a guy in a tuxedo and a guy in a furry mask.
Okay.
Who's dressed as a bear.
I don't know if she clocks in the moment that they are ghosts or that they are humans. I would be surprised.
That it's humans. I feel like she's scared because she sees people.
She thinks they're alive
alone.
people. And you know what? I don't want to see somebody going down on somebody else unless I'm involved. Personally.
Yeah, and the door's wide open, and also we've been in this hotel for months and have not seen
Suddenly
life.
there's
and
oral
they see
sex
her,
happening?
which is scary. I always think if she had just seen them and they were oblivious to her, it's not as scary as you see somebody and you're like, oh my god, and then they've
you.
Seen me. That's really scary.
Yes.
So she sees them, she screams, she takes off. Then she finds that Dick is dead. That's terrifying.
Sad, very upsetting. He's such a good dude.
Then she finds
R.I.P.
And she's trying to get away from there. And there's the guy in the tuxedo with the blood down his forehead.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, "Nice party, isn't it?"
Yeah, that I'm not going to dig that either.
And then she goes into the room that she was in before, but it's full of skeletons and spider webs.
Oh, right.
This
That was
for
very, like,
hotel
Haunted
is
Mansion-y.
fucking
Yes,
with her.
this is for me where we get confirmation beyond the pantry that
it's
we do get further confirmation. I guess so. There's
supernatural.
actually two elements for me that are confirmation that this is supernatural. There's the pantry release for Jack earlier. There's also this because Wendy has never hallucinated. We understand that she is not someone who hallucinates. We've never seen that. And so her seeing all of this is confirmation that there's magic at work and that it is evil magic. She's a little bit like our proxy in certain ways.
Mhm.
And so for her to see this, it's like, fuck, man, this is real.
Well, and it always freaks me out because it's like she just needs to get out of this hotel, and
Get
the
out.
hotel won't let her.
Mhm.
And then the big
It's very Hotel California.
elevator
Straight
finally like lands, and it's blood comes pouring out.
Everybody, the elevator has its period.
Of course, it's scary, but there is something very serene and beautiful to me about it. I love
the
that
hotel
shot.
is just bleeding now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is the hotel like a messy bitch who lives for drama? Like, is the
Yeah, I
hotel
think
just
so.
like
Or
having a
is
wild
it that
time?
when Dick was dead, it's like feeding off the blood of Dick? Like the death of Dick has fed the hotel, and now the hotel is more powerful, and that's why it can finally reach Wendy, and she can see all this stuff.
That's true. Maybe. 'Cause
Like it had
hurts.
its
hurts.
sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, you'd think the hotel, if that's how it works, gets stronger and can then guide Jack to help him kill his wife and child.
But it might be too late because Jack's out by then.
Yeah, he's
Jack
outside.
goes chasing out.
Do you
I
think the
mean-
maze doesn't count as part of the hotel?
No, I don't.
That's probably why maybe it's why Danny can outwit it because we don't see anything.
There's no ghost ever seen
Yeah.
in the maze.
Yeah, I read that in the book they're like animal-shaped hedges.
It's topiaries.
Yes, animal topiaries, and that
They come alive.
Kubrick thought that what I read was that Kubrick thought it was too cutesy and not scary enough, and I actually think it would be more terrifying. There's something about that
Oh, okay.
sweet, cute
Yeah.
animal.
Then I recommend you watch the Steven Weber version because that is in the Steven Weber version. So you
The
can
what?
see
Stevens version. The version
Yeah, in the
Stevens
Steven Weber version of The Shining.
Wait, I forgot that. Did you say that
We've,
he's in
we've
that?
talked about that repeatedly. Yes.
Well,
We've
I
been
kept
here
thinking the
forever.
Stephen King version of The Shining.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying when Steven Weber is
but
Jack
Stephen
Torrance.
Weber plays
yes,
Jack
dude.
Torrance.
We talked about this yesterday.
We talked about this at the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I knew you
Who
said
did
he
you
was
think
in
that's
That's why we
something.
were talking about Steven, our friend.
I didn't
Who
realize.
Steven Weber would be?
Did
There's
you think I
only three
randomly was just
characters.
like
Yeah, that's
on this
true.
podcast about The Shining? I'm just
I
gonna
don't
bring
know
up
it was
Steven
a
Weber.
series. I thought he might have just like introduced him
It's
to
a
the hotel, but
miniseries.
he's
Yeah, it was a miniseries on I forget what network, but
Probably
yeah.
ABC.
Yeah, I haven't
Oh.
seen
But
it.
if you're interested in what would this be like with topiaries, watch the
Okay.
miniseries.
You've
It
seen
doesn't have a haze. It doesn't have a maze. If you want to see him be more, Jack be more sweet. If you want to see Wendy be stronger in the beginning, and also a blonde,
Who
Well, now
plays
I
Wendy?
also-
Who plays
Rebecca De Mornay.
Wendy? Love it. Oh, you told me that. I forgot that. You told me that
her.
yesterday.
So I'm
Because
obsessed with Leonard
everyone
Cohen.
had a problem with the fact that Wendy is brunette in this, which I don't
Damn, that
understand.
works
But if you want to see these things,
Oh,
if
I
you
love
think
Rebecca
that
De
that's a better
Mornay.
version,
She's great.
check out the movie. Because I've seen
Let's all
both,
get Steven Weber
and I
in.
like this version.
The Shining film fans typically hate it, almost across the board seem to really like Shining stans seem to really dislike it because it is so different.
And it's more sentimental, which I don't like.
And some people
have a cold heart.
who've read the book though do like it. People who prefer the book, which is a small
And the
but
book
vocal
is
minority.
different than the miniseries, too.
Yeah, I'm sure they're all three separate
Because
beasts.
the book, there's like, it takes forever to get to the hotel in the book. There's a whole bunch of backstory about Jack.
Oh, I'm curious. I
And
mean, I
his
also just want to see
students.
Stevie do it.
Little Stevie,
Yeah,
little Steves.
I like him very much. I think he's so talented.
He's great.
Well, we're coming to the end because
yes,
he's
I have
able to
leave
get out of the
soon.
maze. Wendy is finally able to get out of the hotel.
Thank God. I'm so relieved. That is such a relief moment when she gets the
Oh
fuck
my
out of there. I'm
gosh, I
like,
Would she?
know.
Can you imagine how good that like cold snow air felt to her when she
Mhm.
finally got out of that hotel?
I would be actively pissing myself.
And they're able.
The whole
Dick
time.
very politely left the keys in the snowcat,
Dick
Yes,
is the
very
best.
polite.
so she doesn't have to go back and try to get the keys off his body.
One thing I want to touch on about the snowcat that I liked is we see Jack disassemble the radio,
Mm-hmm.
but when he says, "Oh, I got a surprise for you," and we see the snowcat, it's like we experience her heartbreak on a different level because we were prepared for half of that surprise, but not the
Yeah.
other half. I thought that was a very smart way to do it.
She finds Danny. She throws the knife down, which is I studied that in horror class about how women always throw knives down because they're phallic. They hug.
She
they
throws him into the
They get on the
snowcat,
snowcat and
then
they
she gets
take
in.
off.
Oh,
And then it
there you
cuts
go.
to Jack, and he's just lost in
In
that
the maze.
He's wailing.
He's screaming
hurts.
unintelligible stuff.
But then we cut to the morning, and Jack is frozen dead.
And I love that image. It's so creepy, so potent.
And then we go back into the hotel where
And
we see the picture
the
that's been there this
photograph.
whole time. That the Overlook Hotel, July 4th ball, 1921, and who's front and center? Jack Torrance.
So the only thing I remembered about this movie before
Ugh.
rewatching it was that last shot. And it made me mad because I'm like, how would these two people look exactly the same? This is hanging in the hotel. The people that hire him have never seen it. They never notice it. And there are several different theories. One is that the hotel sort of absorbed him, and so he appears in that photo after he dies, after the hotel claims him. But then also in interviews, Kubrick says, whatever, it's a ghost story. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense.
Right.
And
I agree with that.
I feel like I can enjoy it more doing that. Generally, what I want, personally, from a movie is this sort of like making sense. And I think if the pantry hadn't let him out, then you could kind of interpret things in a different way. But they're throwing a lot of shit at it between the burial ground, the Tony of it
They're
all.
just having fun.
They're kitchen sinking it.
They are.
I grew up with David Lynch, so I am not with him as a person, but I grew up watching.
What a dream.
I grew up watching David Lynch from a really early age because my dad is obsessed with David Lynch, and so I grew up knowing like things don't make sense.
Yeah, I like them to make sense. However, The Shining is very beautifully done, and the performances are incredible, and the sound design is remarkable, and so I feel like it has earned its place in history.
That note at the end can be taken quite metaphorically and literally at the same time. Like, wow, he's repeating a pattern. Do not we all repeat certain patterns? Hopefully not involving axe murders.
Yeah. Fun fact, that
You
photo
know.
is actually from the 1920s, and they, I guess it wouldn't be Photoshop, but they superimposed his face onto the body in that photo. Okay, who is the antagonist? Is it the hotel? Is it Jack? What are your thoughts?
I think it's Jack.
I think it's Jack.
Interesting. I think it's both.
Okay.
Okay.
I think the hotel opens up a space for Jack to be who he really is and to show us who he really is.
You think the hotel is like how on Sex and the City they were always like, well, it's really about 5 characters. New York's the 5th lady.
Well,
Pretty much.
But I think in a much more tangible way, because the hotel is like filled with ghosts and demons and
It's got its own
so
arc.
much. Yeah, so much of the movie is that space.
Ugh, the hotel's probably loved and lost. It's had romance. There could be prequels about the hotel's
Yeah.
relationships with like other hotels. It briefly dated a Holiday Inn in Wolf Creek and it didn't work out. And that's why the Overlook's so fucking mad.
I want to do. Hopefully, I mean, we can always
Yeah, we
recut
have to
it and
wrap up
change
'cause
it.
I do have
but
to go.
I also I have a show in a half an hour.
Yeah.
I want to do one
It's
quick
fucking
thing,
4 o'clock.
Yeah,
That's
we
which
gotta go.
is show you the trailer for Shining and then get your quick thoughts on that.
Okay. I mean, I don't love it. I'll be honest. I don't love it. I have some notes. I think this could have been 60 minutes long.
Yeah.
But you know what? Good for whoever spent time cutting that together.
You don't love it? That's
Don't love it.
crazy. It's genius.
It may have been oversold to me. I'll be
All right,
honest.
I hyped it up. I feel like there's no overhyping.
It mostly just made me want to listen to Peter Gabriel. I was like, fuck, man, he's the best.
I mean, they're not mutually exclusive.
Thank you so much for being our guest.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Would
You're
you like to
welcome.
plug anything?
Yes, please go to read all of my books. You can find buy links at sarahbenincasa.com/books. I'm at Sarah J. Benincasa on Twitter, at Sarah J. Benincasa on Instagram. I am also at Excellent Coats on Irritated Women on Instagram. And I have a podcast called Where You From, which you can find wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you again.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for
Wonderful.
listening. Please rate, review, subscribe.
Yeah, please
Come
say
back
really
for
nice
more.
things. Say good things about us.
We'll be back with another movie.